talking about something that I know, Dan, was very like personal and real for me. I've kind of teased it a little bit, but in particular, growing up here in the Texas Hill Country, as I know you and I both did, these ideas were just everywhere. You know,
Mm-hmm.
when
Mm-hmm.
like I said, when I was doing research for this episode, the small city of Waco kept coming up over and over again, not just because of Baylor University, but also because of Magnolia, Chip and Joanna Gaines'
Mm-hmm.
bizarre monument to, I
Mm-hmm.
think, in a lot of ways, this kind of thinking. Uh, Tell me a little bit about some of the ideas that you saw growing up.
Yeah, so I grew up in Waco, Texas. It used to be known as the town where a bunch of people were on a compound that got lit on fire by the ATF and the FBI in the 90s. And now it's known for reality home television shows to, talk about buying, antebellum houses and stuff. So that's a weird like shift in reputation that I have seen happen growing up in Waco, and it's very bizarre because
And yet it feels like a pretty straight line in some ways, though, doesn't it?
I don't know, man. I don't know. I can say this. Waco is, if you look at like, demographics maps of where the Bible Belt is, like Waco goes right through it, right? Like it's in the heart of Texas. It's the central Texas area. And obviously, if you know anything about David Koresh, like religion's kind of a big deal for a lot of people here. And so it doesn't surprise me that you read a lot of stories about gender complementarianism. Another church that's famous in the Waco area is the Antioch Church. And they were the church that Jimmy Seibert, which is the pastor there, like made a big sermon all against gay people when like gay marriage was legalized and stuff that like got in the national news and stuff. I remember that happening. So that's very cool. But yeah, when you have a lot of people who believe in a fundamentalist religion out there, obviously, again, these ideas about gender pop up. Like it's just part and parcel. So I experienced a lot of that growing up. I am a big dude. I'm like 6'5", okay, and I was always a big dude. So there was a lot of expectations on me on how I should be living my life as a big dude that I never particularly felt comfortable with. I mean, I told this story on Truth Wanted last week, but I was a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout, so I did a lot of those kinds of activities, and that's also a Christian organization that has ideas about like manhood and like what the expectations are to be a man and stuff like that. And it's not that not all of those expectations are bad. Some of them I think are kind of good in some ways. Like, yeah, you should be confident in yourself. You should be someone in the community that people look up to. Okay, those are fine, but it's the prescriptive elements of this stuff that gets really kind of out of hand. So I experienced a lot of that kind of stuff growing up. And of course, I guess I'll talk about this now. When I was in high school, my girlfriend told me to read Wild at Heart, which Wild at Heart, of course, is this book that talks about these roles between men and women. I'll tell you this. I didn't really remember a whole lot about this book other than men are supposed to be this like warrior race and women are just supposed to be like, I don't know, the cheerleaders of the warriors. Like that's kind of my
staff. Yeah.
yeah, like that was like
The
my
helpmeet.
yeah, that was my, I mean, that's really what they think. Like I believe they use the term like helper and stuff in these things. So it's very weird. It's very weird because I remember having that conversation with my girlfriend and saying like, I think a lot of this is kind of crap. And she being kind of shocked by this because that obviously wasn't a popular view where I was from. And so now, of course, living a little bit more of life, I realize even more that this is bullshit. Like I didn't go the other way. I wasn't like, oh, well, actually, looking at these roles, they actually do have some credit to them. Like it's just, like I've learned to live my own life and be the person that I want to be and be happy in that. And I'm glad because had I followed a lot of these rules and expectations, I probably would have gotten myself into more unhealthy situations with people and unhealthy relationships that I don't think would have been good for me or my partner. And I think you see that happen in the news every day when we talk about these, again, domestic violence situations, but also situations from women, especially that feel like that they're trapped in these relationships and in these roles that they really don't want to be in. Again, like the negatives primarily happen with women, although men, of course, a lot of that comes from being a failure, these feelings of not living up to these expectations of what a man should be. Like that's also an equally important conversation to talk about, and something that I definitely experienced in parts of my life. But it just kind of harms everybody. There's not a lot of good that comes out of it, honestly.
Yeah, fair to say. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Nate, I'm very curious about your experience being a parent in a two male household. I mean,
um,
the roles and the expectations that go along with that. Yeah.
Well, first of all, it was weird for me growing up because my parents were very, very Christian. Grew up very, very Pentecostal, but there was always a division of labor there. Like she taught her boys to cook, her husband helped prepare meals, and so it was odd that there was that Pentecostal craziness, and then on the other hand, you had an absolute fair division of chores and of work.
Hmm.
Um, as far as raising kids, it's been pretty easy for me because I deconverted so very long ago. Like it's been 30 years nearly for me. Um, my partner presents extremely gay, so he would definitely have the more expectation of the female role. But again, we don't really play to that. Like I do probably 90% of the cooking. He doesn't do bathrooms, right? So we just kind of we just divide it along what we're good at and what we want to do, and somehow it works out pretty well, and we've got a pretty healthy little family going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll acknowledge that there's nothing wrong with finding your role. We do complement each other when we're in a partnership. And truth be told, I usually am the one that takes out the trash. My partner is usually the one that does the laundry. And so there are a lot of areas in our life where we do fall down those like specific lines. But Dan, you've been pointing out this whole time that the real danger here is when it becomes prescriptive, when it becomes like
Mm,
an obligation.
mhm.
And I wonder just how that shows up in daily life for y'all even now. Even, Nate, you said you've deconstructed these ideas a long time ago. I know that I've been actively working at it for a while myself, but I know it still pops up in my thinking, and I certainly hear it even in not explicitly like religious ways, not in ways that are necessarily tied to a deep and sophisticated theology. What do y'all see on a regular basis?
I mean, my partner has seen me cry way, way more times than I've seen my partner cry. Like that's just as a fact. In fact, I can count on that. I really haven't seen her cry. It's like I
Stone cold.
it's different. Like and the only people that should care about that is us, right?
Mm,
Like
mhm.
that's all that really matters, if that even matters, which it doesn't. And that's just kind of how I feel about this, right? It's like, okay, like you're telling a story about how you take out the trash, and I'm just hearing this like, okay, so what? You took out the
Right.
trash. If you were living by yourself, that's something you would do anyway. Like I don't know, it's like these kinds of things, sometimes basic human necessities we've kind of genderized in a way that doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. Like cooking is often established as a feminine thing, which is weird because then we've got celebrities like Gordon Ramsay who are like yelling at people all the time, and like I don't know, it's just
Yeah.
just
If
playing
it's
these
in a
roles.
restaurant or if
Yeah.
it is in front of like a grill or a cook fire, then it's quote
Yeah,
man's
then it's
work.
man. Yeah, then if it's in a barbecue or whatever,
But
right?
the
Yeah.
the
So
the boring like menial stuff that's for women.
it's like getting credit for something that you really didn't do. You know what I mean? It's like I just kind of showed up here like this. I didn't really earn it. I don't know. Like is that what it means to be a man, is to like earn your place in the society? Is that why we have this nomenclature that says, "Oh, well, you're not a real man unless you do X, Y, and Z." Like maybe that's part of it. Maybe the reason why men are having this higher power in our social strata is because of this performative sort of act that you have to do to earn it, and the subsequent hardships and harm that can come of it is kind of the payment. I mean, like it's no secret that, for example, organized militaries, for as long as organized militaries have primarily been the roles of men, like, and
Mhm.
especially in our I mean, like it wasn't even legal for women to serve in most places in the world, right? So it's like why does that happen? Why does that exist? Again, it's part of this thing where you have to earn your stripes in order to like have this power. And obviously the whole system's fucking stupid, and I would just reject it outright. So whatever.
Yeah, and these things show up in the goofiest kinds of ways. Like one thing I always like to point out is the trope of the doofy husband in like a bad sitcom situation. And I honestly think that trope exists of the husband being sort of dumb and dull and slow, because when they try to depict that relationship in art, they want to be very careful to balance out the power, because in reality that man is the one who's calling the shots in nearly every scene, that's driving the plot along, that is the focus of everything. So we have to make him a little bit dumb so that people don't recognize that imbalance.
Yeah,
I didn't realize we were going to be talking about Al Bundy tonight.
Yeah.
I still get most sitcoms that have ever existed, but
yeah, seriously.
I see a lot of these sort of dying paradigms being relayed as sort of jokes. So, for example, like my grandmother, whenever we would have like family meals, and it would be we'd finish up, she'd be like, "Okay, ladies, into the kitchen," and literally the men would just get to sit there, fat and giggly, while the women went and cleaned up. Now she's since passed away, but still to this day, whenever we're finished and I cook a meal, because again I usually do the cooking, and she'll say the same thing, but she's referring to my partner who is a man, but it's a joke, and she'll be like, "Okay, ladies, into the kitchen." But there's an understanding now that it's not because she has a vagina, right? That's not the reason that they're going to share their share of the workload, right? It's because if one person does one thing, another person helps out, and we all share the load. Which, humor can be a great source of levity for letting go of that kind of old shit.
Well, I think like a post-industrial society has also just changed the way that men and women like actually pragmatically function in our relationships as well. And because we've seen a more equalization of these roles, I mean, a woman, like, really, it's obviously there's still struggles to be had in this area, but it is actually possible for a woman to make as much of a man, if not more so, in bringing home the bacon, as they say, than a man. And like that difference in powers now has also changed the way that we are organizing ourselves too, and having these conversations. It's no longer this obvious quote unquote biological function that people are pointing to, where it's like, oh well, of course these men are bigger and stronger, so they have to be the ones to do the hard manual labor to bring these down, when half of us are working office jobs and aren't like are doing the same kind of work that anybody could do regardless of their situation.
Well, and what's amazing to me is people will point to the fact that, women didn't used to exist in the workforce in a meaningful way, and how there was so much more leisure time and everything was so much more comfortable when a man could go out and work hard and bring that home to the family. And wouldn't it be great if we could make America great again by going back to that type of lifestyle? And, it can feel tempting in a lot of ways. Not because I am like excited to work all the time and then come home to a roast and a martini, but because there's like a legitimate point to be made about how we are as a country all just working more. Like the average person is putting in more labor hours than we used to. And people want to blame that problem on women joining the workforce, when I don't think that's the most likely culprit here.
Yeah.
That makes zero sense. Zero sense. Like, no. And yeah, that's one thing that I was going to say too, is that a part of this is probably the fact that surviving on a single income in 2022 is next to impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's just no way. Everybody's got to contribute. So these sort of old ideas just have to die. The sooner the better.
You're really speaking to me right now, Nate. You really are. I gotta say.
I think monogamy might be on the way out if inflation continues the way that it is.
Oh my God, you're so right. That's so true. I was just gonna point out that also men just feel emasculated if a woman is accomplishing more in a role that's supposed to be traditionally what a man should be able to accomplish. Like, for example, my partner, who is a woman, makes more than me. And like, you tell that to some people and they just think, oh, well, your man's a joke. You know, what's your man doing in
Right.
this thing? And I'm just here like, it's fucking awesome, dude. It's great. Like, I'm not complaining. I'm having a good time over here. You're the guys that are mad about it. I don't know. I think there are some dudes who would like have a problem with that if their partner would make more than them, because what does that mean? It means that sometimes we make decisions about financial related things, and she has more saying power, and that's uncomfortable for some dudes to handle, because that's not what they are told that they should be expecting. So like, get over it, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
This is the world now.
is there reason to believe that these ideas might be dying out? I mean, we know so much about how the natural world doesn't reflect this like complementary male female dichotomy. I mean, we look at the mating habits of everything from like bees to bonobos, and we look at chromosomal diversity and sexual orientation. And like, we've learned so much about these topics, and yet we're still holding on to these beliefs. And there's maybe even like a loud, I don't know, death rattle for them, or maybe a rejuvenation. I mean, what do y'all predict?
I think the death rattle thing's accurate. I was just saying earlier, like, I grew up in a very, very Christian family, but there was still a fair division of labor, and I learned to cook because I wanted to, and I wasn't ever like told that, that's woman's work. You shouldn't want to do this. You should want to go chop wood or fucking barbecue, or I don't know what. But Dan, what did you want to say?
Well, nothing more than like, there is a shift in like what people consider important in like the social side of politics that happens every half decade or so. And like, right now in current media is trans people are just being talked about a lot, specifically trans women being in spaces where women are feeling like, oh, these are actually men in disguises taking over, traditional women's spaces. Like, that's kind of the rhetoric that you're seeing. And it's almost like this, like, I don't know. It's this recognition that these roles are real in a way, because if you're acknowledging gendered people in spaces, and that there's a difference in power dynamics and stuff, then like, you have to also come to the conclusion that like, women have not had it good for like a lot of it, which is like this weird thing that like people can simultaneously acknowledge and yet still be bigoted towards, which is just like really fascinating to see. That's what we're seeing right now, I think.
Well, I know for myself, these ideas took a long time to deconstruct, and still are being deconstructed. I still find myself sort of having these types of thoughts pop up in some very weird ways, or just having assumptions that I maybe haven't challenged yet. Are there things that come to mind for y'all where folks should be maybe curious about themselves? I mean, if we want to be introspective and really deconstruct this, what do y'all see coming up?
Nate, you go first. Not it.
1, 2, 3, not it.
For those who can hear the audio podcast.
What did you ask again?
Yeah, well, I certainly don't mean to stump y'all. I guess the question is just, when people start to think about these ideas, they notice that they're everywhere, or certainly that's been my experience. And I think it takes a long time to root all of this out. I mean, it's just microplastic in the water that we're all swimming in. These assumptions about like, men are like this and women are like this, and all of that type of like 90s bullshit stand-up comedy is just still everywhere. And I wonder if there's any advice that y'all have for encouraging people to just notice it, or to begin to break those things down.
I think it's important to actually talk about it when you notice it, and actually vocalize it, and make sure that the other people around you realize that you're catching this, and that now we know that this isn't correct. And maybe we can get a laugh out of it, but really it's just not that funny.
Yeah. I mean, I could say looking at statistics from the past 100 years and seeing how the development of, I don't know, economic stability for single women has become has a direct correlation with how much power women are now having in society. Like, you know, starting with really a material analysis is what is most interesting to me, and what I think people should look at if they want to talk about, you know, just the fact of the matter, like what happens when you give people who have traditionally had to make amends on their own dreams and, you know, ideas for themselves in order to become homemakers, right? Because that's what their society and their family has told them to do. What happens when you give them that freedom to make choices for themselves, to make career decisions, to make you know, choices that are not going to reflect those traditional values? You come into seeing what we're starting to see in America, which is people having that freedom and expressing it in ways that might be unexpected or nuanced. So if you want to see more of a difference, give people more money. I don't know. Yeah,
That's good. That's good. Well, I'm reminded of a story that a thing that happened to me there about confronting these bad ideas when they come up, because somebody said when Elliot Page came out as trans there, I think it was a year or two ago, and they said, "Oh, she's just doing it for attention." I'm like, why would anybody do that for attention? Like, I'm going to pretend that you didn't say that. And we got into a little bit of a story about how we're all stronger and we're all better off when we can chase our dreams, when we can be the most productive at what we're good at. Like, think about how many brilliant female scientists or female leaders that we've missed out on over the generations because of this bullshit. Like, there's so many of them out there. I gave the example of Alan Turing, right? Like, a brilliant man cracks the Enigma code, invents the computer, kills himself because he was criminalized for being gay. Like, think what he might have done had he lived another 20 years. And think how much more productive the rest of us might be if we were happy. We were allowed to do what we want to fucking do.
Yeah, or for the MRA, the men's rights activists in the audience who are just very skeptical about, you know, the goals of feminism and what it seeks to accomplish. Yeah, look at why are there more men that commit to rates of suicide in our country and in other countries more so than women? Why does that happen? Is there a reason for this? And it can also be because of these gender expectations and gender roles. I guarantee you hear about the stories of people who are most depressed in their lives, and it's because they feel like that they are failures, because they don't have they're not setting up to these expectations. Again, that this is
measuring themselves with the wrong measuring stick in a lot of ways.
Measuring themselves with the wrong measuring sticks. Exactly. Like, this is a very common sentiment that happens amongst men. This kind of performance anxiety that is set upon these expectations that are just rules that people made up. You know?
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of my own story in that because I very much grew up around these types of ideas and had a pretty narrowly defined notion of what a man was supposed to be. And I sure as shit am just not that guy.
Yeah.
And so there was a real relief in recognizing that, like, oh, I'm not a shitty man. I'm just, like, not really a man. Not in that like strict, narrowly defined kind of way.
I'm just a dude. I'm like the fucking what do you call it? The welcome to Good Burger song, you know. I'm a dude, we're all dudes. Like, that's
we're
how
just
I've always
all
seen
dudes.
I love that song.
Dude, isn't it great? I'm just like, I'm just here. I don't have to. I'm very anarchist about this, right? It's like, I am going to continue being who I am, and that just happens to fall into sometimes what a man is, and sometimes not. But it's just I exist, and I am, therefore I am. I don't know.
Yeah.
What else you want me to say about it, you know?
No, I mean, for me, it really did take a while, and a big part of deconstructing was through film. You know, just being able to kind of inhabit the eyes of somebody else for a couple of hours, and to see different ways of being a man, different ways of being a person depicted.
Yeah.
what kinds of things have been useful for y'all? I mean, has it been a particular movie or a book? Is there a particular idea that was useful in helping you to start to see this in daily life?
For me, cooking shows. This is
Sure.
going to sound dumb, but cooking shows and seeing that men could be successful cooks, chefs, business owners, and also so could women. Another thing that helped me was in my experience in the army with a female officer in the infantry. When I was in basic training, there was, I think, 6 women out of 84 candidates, and two of those women, like I mean, half the people quit anyway, but 2 of those women, they were some hard fucking soldiers, man. One of them went on to sniper school. She did the battle fitness test with a fractured tibia. She
Mm.
was tough as nails.
Mm.
Like, and that really was an experience for me to be like, wow, like that is one badass soldier. So yeah, there's a couple for me.
That's interesting. I'm glad you say that, Nate, because if you ask the typical man, what's the like top 10 most inspiring people to you, 9 times out of 10, that entire list is going to be men.
Sure.
And I think like as men, we should be okay to be like, oh, I like this woman. I want to be more like her because I like the qualities that this person has. I mean, like if you want to talk about good male role models for me, I fucking love Mr. Rogers. Dude, I think Mr. Rogers is like the man. I think like if more dudes were like Mr. Rogers, the world would be a better place. Like
Mm.
that's just besides his secret anti-gay sentiments aside, like the at least what he presented on TV as his persona,
Sure.
like that's what I think is real good forms of, I don't know, masculinity, if you want to call it that. I just think it is personhood, but like he was a dude, so we can talk about that. But I can say for myself, for most of my working career, more often than not, my bosses have been women
Mm.
more than men, and I've really liked most of the women that I've worked for. Like I enjoyed their presence. I think that they have great leadership qualities, and I knew that they could do lots of shit that I couldn't do because of their training and because of their dedication to their work. So I really like those women in my life, and I think I don't know, it's weird sometimes, like when you don't hear men talking about the women that they respect. It's always like a lot of dudes, which I guess makes
Sure.
sense. You want people who have that gender experience you're going to relate to a little bit more, right? But like, I don't know, like Albert Einstein lived in a whole fucking other time period compared to me. Like I could say he's a cool guy, but like all we have in common is that we're both dudes. Like he studied physics way more. I like talk on Thursday night call-in shows. We're very different otherwise.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many bizarre pieces to all
Mm,
of this, and it,
mm,
it lands in so many weird ways. Working in mental health, the
mm,
vast majority of my coworkers for the past 7, 8 years have been women.
yeah.
And yet, I had an experience not that long ago where I was sitting in a conference room. I was the only man in the place. There were 20 people there. I was not particularly well dressed. I wasn't near the head of the table. And there was a woman, our boss, standing up, addressing everybody. And yet, when somebody from an outside group came in looking to ask a question to the leader, took a beeline directly for me. And I think that men need
Mm,
to go out of their way to recognize that that happens.
yeah.
That the
Yeah.
reason why their idols are typically men is because that's who's on TV. That's who is in the history books. And
Yeah.
to actively work against that, it's not changing history, it's recalibrating things to actually show a more accurate depiction of the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very true.
Absolutely. And Boudica's a thing too. I love that story. The warrior queen of the Iceni. Oh, one of the great women. For if you don't know
See,
who she is, folks, look up that story. It is an amazing story of a strong-willed woman.
Nate, you're just too cultured for me sometimes. You talk
Yeah,
about
Well, I'm
you
clearly,
talk
I'm
about
clearly.
French cities and like I just don't know. You know?
I'm just a history nerd. Also, a woman killed Cyrus the Great. Moving on.
That's cool.
Well, Nate, before you wrap us up for the night, was there anything else in this space that stands out as I guess a problem that people aren't noticing? Because that to me is the scariest part of all of this, is how insidious it is.
I think people are noticing. I
Mm.
think that it's really you're only going to find this kind of backwards shit in Christian fundamentalism. Like I don't think you're really going to find that anywhere else, because that's where it comes from. If you don't have that, oh, okay, well, like I said, with the exception of other religions, but really, it's religion. It's telling you what to do, right?
Not based in math and science.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like don't tell me how to live my life. And when you get into that sort of like Dan's been harping on about for an hour now, it's like, don't give me the prescription for how to live my life. I'll figure it out on my own. Thanks very much.
Mhm.
Yeah, man. I
Yeah,
don't like
man.
when the man tells me what to do. You know? It's just-
You were really channeling the less than Jake tonight, huh?
I don't know what's up, but
The good burger.
It's just the vibe. It's the vibe
Okay.
I have right now. So